So welcome to the advanced workshop. I hope it's advanced. Mhm. Tonight is the Thursday. This is the third Thursday of the month, right? Yeah, third Thursday. So posture, breath, attention. Attention is the third Thursday. So we will focus on attention. We say attention is sort of the focus of our attention is attention in Zen, which seems circular, but the old man was asked the secret of Zen, calligraphy, attention, didn't understand attention. Attention is answered three times in one seat. So, of course, whatever the Chinese word was, idea had a lot more connotations than simple attention. We pay attention to the posture, we pay attention to the breath. We turn our attention away from the usual clutter and chaos. Monkey mind imposes upon us. And I think a good teaching this as a from a research background, there we have findings, we have conclusions, we have recommendations. If you look at the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, and all the basic teaching, he fall into that kind of camp. He did his own research, as I say these days. He didn't go on Google. He went on his own mind. He consulted his own internet. It goes that way. And in the Shurin Sutra, it's referred to as the matrix of the Thus Come One. So we associate that with the movie Matrix, of course. But in those days, they had metallurgy, they had mining, they mined gold, they smelted gold. So by matrix, they meant the surrounding stone and material in which you will find a vein of gold. Gold was symbolic of enlightenment. So metaphorically or analogically, the whole process of meditation is likened to mining gold. First, you have to find it, right? It's not going to be just anywhere. It's going to be it's rare, by definition, a rare metal. So it's going to exist under certain conditions that nature formed. And they were able to find that in mines. Like they had to dig with a hand with shovels and picks or whatever tools they had. It's hard to imagine now uh, with our technology and so forth. So, but they called what they found it in the matrix of earth, stone, et cetera, all around. And matrix of the thus come one thereby consists of everything in your reality, everything, your DNA, your biology, your causes, conditions of your existence as they appear and as you find them. Each of us has a different mix of those kinds of things. But the matrix is, in a sense, the same for all of us. It's sort of like everything. Gold is not separate from the stone around it. Stone is not separate from the mountains and so forth. The mountains are not separate from the earth, and the earth is not separate from the solar system, et cetera, et cetera. So we pay attention, we bring our attention back from our conceptual level of thinking about ideas about Zen, you might say, or ideas about what we're doing, to a very direct kind of apprehension of what is real in the present moment. Back in you guys are too young for this. Back in the '60s, they had expressions like "trying to keep it real" compared to what? I think I've heard some. There was kind of a blossoming awareness of Eastern philosophy the 50s and 60s, of which I was part of it. My exposure to Zen and my pursuit of the practice of Zen was part of that. And it had some pretty funny offshoots in the culture. But this idea of paying attention, think about it just from a stupid, simple kind of, there's nothing to it. I mean, you can't not pay attention. You have to pay attention to something. So how do we direct our attention? And if you study the Sharingama Sutra, as I'm doing with some of the folks online, uh, you'll begin to see what is meant by this matrix. It's essentially uh, where Buddha's experience came from was not simply his mind. He was not simply in the sense of intellectual discriminating mind. He didn't sort of make this up. He didn't invent a new philosophy. He discovered something which is fundamental and primordial even. And so he resorted to using expressions like the matrix of the thus come one, try to give it its sort of universal quality. So when we sit in Zen, people say, what are you paying attention to? And when Bodhidharma would turn and face the wall, uh, the pundits in China mistakenly thought he was demonstrating jhana. Jhana practice is contemplation practice, traditional way of form of meditation, really. It's a sort of specific thing where, as I understand how it works or how it's supposed to work, you contemplate an object, and the object would typically be something natural, like a plum branch or something. And to set it in front of you and contemplate it. They thought he was turning and contemplating the mountain wall, which is a cliff or a bluff that will put the mountain there, or Inji. Or what was the TV show? Shaolin. Kung Fu. Yeah, Shaolin Temple. There is an actual temple there. Japanese is called Shorinji, and that's where Bodhidharma actually was. So there's some basis to the fictionalized part of the story. But he wasn't demonstrating jhana. He wasn't contemplating the cliff, or just the wall. That's how they ended up calling it wall gazing Zen. It was a misunderstanding of what he was demonstrating. He was demonstrating what we now call shikantaza in Japanese, just precisely sitting or objectless meditation. So there's no longer a subject contemplating an object. So when people ask what you pay attention to when you're sitting, you could run down the list and say, well, please join. Forgotten your name. What's your name again?
Nate.
Nick?
Nate. Nate. Nate.
Nate. That's right, Nate. Welcome. This is third Thursday. So it's first Thursday is posture, second is breath, third is attention. Those are the three that play since they both the time. And the fourth Thursday we go into something else. So we're talking about what do we pay attention to when we do meditation, when we're sitting in meditation. And of course, the instructions are, instructions start with the obvious, you might say. Pay attention to your posture. Pay attention to your breath. Pay attention to your thoughts. And that seems very circular because we think thinking is paying attention, but not according to Zen. Thinking is the output of the brain. I think it was Uchiyama Roshi said, secretions of the brain. Thoughts are secretions of the brain. Just as color, light, color, shape, form, the object of vision, sounds, pitch, frequency, intensity, loudness, softness, characteristics of the object of hearing, the object of thinking, or concepts, ideas, words, typically because we learn a language and then we find ourselves thinking in that language. Remember Okamura, she was here one time and he said, I'm speaking very slowly because I'm thinking in Japanese and speaking in English, so I have to translate everything that I want to say, and that takes time. And people who are multilingual tell us that there's a point at which they can think in that language. And some have even told me that, like we have one guy in Chicago who speaks 6 different languages and fluently. And he said several people like that in our group. They say that there's some languages that are easier to think about certain kinds of things like physics or mathematics in that language than it is in another language. I regret that I never became bilingual, so I don't have that experience. I just think it would sort of enrich your mental landscape, if you will. So, following the instructions, we pay attention to the posture, and while we're doing this, by the way, continue to review all the instructions for the posture, rocking motion, and get yourself settled in. Take an aggressive approach to all that. And if you're uncomfortable, just make yourself comfortable. Uncross the right feet, cross the other way, and so that all the things we talk about during the posture section. And then the breathing section, you've heard most of the instructions around breathing. Continue to do those intuitively on your own. And those are 2 of the things that we are instructed to pay attention to when we're sitting in Zazen. It sounds kind of absurd. You can forgive a newcomer for saying, you mean this is all there is to it? We just sit here and pay attention? Yes, that's it. So the theory is that eventually something will change, paying attention. Pay attention to our thoughts, but we try not to get so engrossed in thought that fall into the trap of trying to analyze and trying to interpret our experience or try to explain it away, try to think our way to enlightenment. Uh, Paying attention is not the same as thinking. Thinking is one of the things we pay attention to. And occasionally, if you are not pushing it aggressively, you will come up with a kind of unusual thought, fresh thought. Something will enter your mind that is different. And this is why we suggest that you can keep a notebook next to where you're sitting. And as things pop up like that, a eureka moment, aha kind of insight for you, just jot it down, set it aside. Set aside all everyday concerns, as Dogen said, and come back to this. So it raises the question, what are we coming back to? If it's not that stuff, what are we coming back to pay attention to? The Bodhidharma had an early formulation. All of these are models that typically consist of 4 things, which is, there I think there's some understandable reasons why most frameworks fall into 4 parts. But he said, first of all, you don't have to do meditation. I'm embellishing here, but there's no way you can connect the fact that you sit in meditation to insight. And Huineng is a standout historical example. Is he had no meditation practice. He had no teacher. He was suddenly overhearing a monk reciting the Diamond Cutter Sutra, part about the mind, true mind being that which sticks nowhere, hit him like a ton of bricks. Something happened. He's in his mid-20s. And he had a profound, transformative insight experience, never having practiced, never having had a teacher, illiterate, could not read the sutras. So you can't establish a causal connection between meditation and insight. But so the way we think of it is we're so enmeshed in life that when we come to sit in meditation, we're carrying a lot of baggage in the door with us. And we've read some books about Zen. Listened to podcasts, or we've discussed, or we've heard things about Zen. The very first time you come here, you're already corrupt. Right? You already sort of filled your head with ideas about what we're doing here. And so The reason we sit in Zazen is to divest ourselves of that confusion. Sitting still enough, straight enough for long enough is just unusual, not normal for a mammal of any kind. Uh, and so you're sort of pushing the envelope of consciousness itself. You're pushing the envelope of logic. It's not logical. Sit still enough, still straight for long periods of time, thinking of nothing in particular. And it's not typically the way the society functions. So it's countercultural, it's counterintuitive. So we just put ourselves in the hands of the teaching, put ourselves in the hand of the teacher, have a little trust in it, and hope, that we're not being sandbagged by another misdirected effort here. But once we get past all that kind of baggage, then we're just sitting here. And I think a kind of regression sets in place. We start going back to what we were like when we were 2 or 3 years old, 4 or 5, whatever. Just pure consciousness, or pure awareness, sometimes called parrot awareness, maybe a better phrase, where the thinking finally settles down. The monkey takes a nap, leaves you alone. You stop trying to analyze everything, not in frustration, but it just doesn't work. I mean, you're chasing its own tail around in circles. So eventually that all settles down, comes to a stop, and then we're left with kind of their awareness, direct consciousness. Again, something like a regression to childlike frame of mind. And we learn to become comfortable in that. Then we're sitting for long periods of time, simply paying attention to, you could say, just everything. We're contemplating everything. We're contemplating existence, contemplating life, contemplating, maybe we're philosophical in nature, and so we like to think about the meaning of life. We like to think about uh, how we would express it, if we could express it, we tend to be poetic and so forth. All that's fine. It's part of your personality, part of what comes up. If you're a musician, you might start hearing music, or you might start thinking of this as a musical kind of experience. If you're a dancer, kinetic artist of some sort, you might think of this as a form of a kinetic practice. If you're visual, like me, trained in visual arts, I become very fascinated with what's happening in the field of vision. So, and along with paying attention to the posture and the breath, and correcting when it's becoming an annoyance or a distraction, so that we settle back into stillness, into the center of the posture, the center of the breath, and so forth. It's no longer disturbing to us. Then our attention naturally can turn to the senses, seeing what we're seeing what the brain is receiving, maybe seeing through what we're seeing, hearing what we're hearing, feeling what we're feeling. The big three are seeing, feeling, hearing, thinking being the fourth. Smelling and tasting, the other two senses kind of adapt very quickly because of their chemical nature, so they don't do much interference. Body posture is usually puts itself into our consciousness through resistance. The tendons are stretching. We're not used to sitting this way. It's not comfortable. We have to keep adjusting our posture. Matsuoka Roshi said, you have to work your way through every bone in your body, continuing making the hundreds of adjustments through the posture as you go until finally you start to become balanced. So then our attention can shift to our senses. Are we actually registering what we're seeing? Are we actually registering what we're hearing? Is it conscious? Is it interrupted? Is it discontinuous? Is it continuous? What is the nature of our consciousness? Remember in the Heart Sutra, it starts out with given emptiness, no form, feeling, thought, impulse, consciousness, 5 skandhas. The form is this real world in which we live, the material world, so to speak. It's also called appearance, rupa. Rupa means form or appearance. Nama-rupa means name and form. So we tend to name it. I'm seeing. This is vision. This is hearing. This is feeling. According to the theory of Zen, all of this begins to merge into one thing, or two. At least we say not two. What we can say is not two. The merging process takes place in which the mind is no longer concerned with separating into seeing, hearing, feeling, so forth. The senses begin to merge. But before that, in the sutra, why the skandhas come first, I'm not sure. I think it's because they're not as personal as your own senses. Skandhas, the five heaps or aggregates, is a way of looking at sentient being. It's kind of abstract. It's form. We all know what appearance is, form. We're experiencing. That's what we're sitting in at the beginning. Then sensation. We know what sensation is. They used to consider form to be the only material, physical skandha. As soon as you were in sensation, you were in mental, mind. You were now in the formless realm. As soon as you segue into or start observing sensation, sensation and form are not exactly the same thing. Sensation is the energetic level of the material world. So today, in modern physics and science, we know matter is energy. So we would say both form or appearance and sensation are both physical material worlds. One is called matter, one is called energy. We have that dichotomy, or we have that pair of dual complementary so-called opposites. We understand that. There's no such thing as empty space. In Buddha's time, they didn't understand that. They conceived of space as empty. When we say space is full of energy, now we're even speaking dark energy, dark matter, and so forth, that we cannot perceive, we cannot compare. So modern scientific approach would be that form and sensation are both the material world. As soon as you segue into perception, now you're moving into the formless mental realm. Perception is how we differentiate seeing from hearing, from smelling, tasting, touching, so forth. And according to the early model of the mind and according to modern science, they're not completely distinct. All the senses seem to overlap uh, in a kind of what's called synesthesia, where there's some common examples of that. That people are called synesthetes if they hear a sound, see a color. If they see a color, they hear a sound, specific colors associated with each other. It's considered a disorder, I think, at its extreme. So we're all partially that way. So going back to the skandhas, we're paying attention, we're witnessing ourselves sitting in form, our appearance. We understand that. And then it begins to become sensation. Your butt turns numb. The dividing line between yourself, your body, your being, and the cushion is becoming a fuzzy boundary. You can't quite feel it distinctly where it was. All the boundaries like that start to break down or start to expand and become gray areas. The sensation begins to sort of fuzz out and everything starts to turn numb. And the boundary line between us and the rest of the world is very unclear. And when your leg, we say, oh, my leg went to sleep. Your leg is adapting, it's turning numb. And if you're not careful when you stand up, put your foot on the floor, you can't exactly feel the floor. And you may fall down if you're not careful. So that's a very simple example. The boundaries of vision, the boundaries of hearing also are like that. Hearing is particularly susceptible to this because we cannot find the dividing point from the inside to the outside in the field of hearing. So as we segue from form into sensation, And you could say at one point we're sitting in sensation only and we left form behind. Everything has become, all the boundaries have merged into not true. In this world of suchness, there is neither self nor other than self. So the subject-object dichotomy has disappeared. This is moving towards Siddhanta objectless meditation. If it's objectless, it also has to be subjectless. The mind is the subject because they're object. Um, object are objects because there is a subject mind. Two define each other. So when one disappears, the other has to disappear. So now we move into perception. Perception is partly conception. Now we're moving into the discriminating mind. We're discriminating perception. The dog barks, we recognize it as a dog barking. If a bird calls, we recognize it as a bird calling. We don't confuse the dog barking with the bird calling. So on. Now we're in the middle kind of perception, which includes conception, or doppelganger. Perception and conception are the dual pair that modify each other in the middle. The middle skandha, because we're moving from form, sensation, first two, which together make up the material world as we understand it more with our modern physics. We've moved into the mental, formless realm. Concept can begin to affect our percept. So if you go into a meeting with a bad boss kind of situation, you anticipate what is going to happen. You anticipate that this is going to be unpleasant. You anticipate, or it could be the other way. You go into a situation that you anticipate is going to be pleasant, and so forth. You have a preconception, you have a prejudgment. When you came here tonight, you may have had some kind of conception of what's going to happen. Maybe disappointed, sorting through it. When you go into the actual situation, your perception of it is being conditioned by your conception of it in subtle ways. So this is where we get into the psychological part of the practice. Middle skandha here, and the perception, conception, is where the discriminating mind begins to work its power. The fifth skandha, often mental formations in English, so samskara, all the underlying motives, impulses, so forth, that is all about psychology typically in our culture. And Buddhism has a kind of psychology. Abhidharma is all the teachings that are about this sort of area. You find yourself sitting in samskara. You find yourself sitting in mental formations. You have all kinds of reasons for why you're doing this, why we're doing this. One by one, they sort of fall away. The reason I started doing Zen 50, 60 years ago were these. These were the complex at that time. Those have all gone away. The reason I'm doing Zen today is not the same as then. So the impulse, the motive, the underlying intent of the practice has changed. And that's another thing we witness, that we pay attention to. And you can say with each of these skandhas, there comes a point at which we leave that skandha behind. So as a general model of progress through meditation, we all start out in form, namarupa. At some point, transitions into sensation. And you can say, we leave form behind, we're sitting in sensation only. We know what you mean by form, and we can return to that. And it will come back. But that's not what's happening in the present. In the present, it has become really a field of sensation. It's said that when you sit on the tanden, this point we visualize being in the center of the pelvis. When you sit on the tanden, it's just as if you're sinking into a field of energy. We feel energy radiating through the body. Kundalini yoga is about that. Key coming from this source of radiating from the tongue and the hara, stomach power. Those are all analogies and metaphors for this process. So here we are then, moving into perception. We leave even sensation behind. Sensation had been sustained for so long, the numb feeling and so forth, that we don't even feel that. We adapt, process of adaptation as we go. We adapt on a finer and finer level. Material world of form is sort of the grossest level, the bottom of the spectrum. As we move into sensation, move into mental perception, move into mental formation, we're moving more towards the ephemeral, more towards the diaphanous, a sort of formless realm of things. So here we are sitting in, you could say, eventually samskara own. We're sitting in mental formations. And we find that, again, the reasons we have for doing this have sort of fallen away again and again. And so we can find ourselves sitting for no reason whatever. And we have no intent. We have no idea why we're sitting. As long as we have a conscious intent, we tend to build expectations and they get disappointed. But eventually, transitioning through the fourth skandha, samskara, even our motives, impulse, intent, all falls away. We find ourselves sitting with no particular reason whatsoever. And so now we're beginning to open up to the true intent of what we're doing and why we're doing it and so forth. And this is where the don't know mind begins to emerge. We don't know, and it's okay that we don't know. There's something bigger, deeper, it's an aspiration of some kind behind all of this. Hikaroshi said, foreground mind, background mind. The reason you came here today, foreground mind, is very hefty, very rapid frequency. All these different reasons you have for doing this practice or doing anything, your job, your family, your lifestyle, your this and that, your hobbies. Lots and lots of reasons. And those are the kinds of reasons that you think brought you here today, and it's all foreground mind, very high rapid frequency. He said, background mind is the real reason you came here today. It's a big, big wave. Every once in a while, the foreground frequency and the background frequency hit. Every once in a while, your windshield wipers and your directional signal come together, but they're not at the same frequency. So the real reason, the background mind, is the real intent behind this. And with Schopenhauer, he says your sexual drives you think are your intention. You think you want this relationship. You want to have this child. Schopenhauer argues that's actually the species that's driving you. The reason opposites attract and so forth is the species wants a hybrid child. So it's a kind of delusion that we take our impulses, our desires to be ours when they're really biological. Buddhism recognizes this in the vintage and refuge. We say, all my past and harmful karma, we used to say, arising from greed, anger, and delusion, born of body, mouth, and mind, I now fully avow. So arising from endless greed, anger, hatred, and delusion. These are like the, I guess you could call fear-based or paranoia-based impulses that we have. And then born of body, mouth, and mind, simple biology. This body has the cravings that I'm trying to satisfy. It's not me. It's not exactly my fault. But my God, I didn't create this and so on. So the repentance of refuges recapture this same idea. So then the suggestion is that we make another transition through samskara into consciousness. And in consciousness only, we're no longer sitting for any reason. We no longer are in the skandha of impulse or motive, intent. The meditation is intentionless. not only subjectless, objectless, but intentionless. In consciousness, of course, you're conscious of the subject and the object. You're conscious of form. You're conscious of sensation. You're conscious of perception. You're conscious of conception. You're conscious of impulse. You're conscious of intent. As all those things have fallen away, you're conscious of consciousness, or any way you want to express it. So the implication, this is very clear in the Srinivas Sutra, is there's you can anticipate a kind of progression. You don't want to try to set it up as must do or anything like that, but eventually you may find yourself sitting in consciousness only. And in the Heart Sutra translation we chanted in Chicago, the line that until we come to know consciousness also. So the implication is that in each of these khandhas, form, sensation, perception, formation, consciousness, there's a point at which it becomes no form, a point at which it becomes no sensation, a point at which it becomes no consistent, a point at which it becomes no formation, a point at which it becomes no consciousness. So it's as if what we experience, even as consciousness, is a form of form. And underlying it is this no consciousness that is the complement to form, the absence of consciousness, or the complement to consciousness. It's as if each one flips each of these five skandhas, which are nothing more than a model of sentient being that was constructed by Buddha and the teacher trying to help others who have not gone all the way through it yet to understand that this is the natural process that's going to set into place. So when you start saying, what do we pay attention to? That's what we pay attention to. And it's a catch-22. We don't want the models and the concepts to become so predominant that we are, again, imposing the concept of that model on our direct experience. Very tricky situation. Now you've been paying attention to my voice up until now. For some of you, it may even become irritating. Wish he would just shut up. If he would just shut up, I could pay attention to what he's asking me to pay attention to. So we spend most of our time listening to the sermon of no words. Sermon of no words. Dogen said it another way. He said, the universe is constantly chanting the sutras. Can't you hear it? So how are we doing on time? Yeah. Okay, so let's take a little break, take a stretch. Let's turn on the light, cool down, or turn off. Either find a place facing a blank wall, plenty of blank walls down that shot you picked up your pen. Any questions before we go on anything? Nate, this is your first class. This is what we do. We just take one thing and try to go deep dive.
What is tonight's session? You said there was
Attention. Not focus of posture, breath, attention is the way you broke it down.
and then you can start over again the next week.
Yes.
Is it just
The fourth week, what do we do the fourth week? We do walking meditation, chanting, one or the other. I don't think we're trying to do both. And then, yeah, fifth, if there's a fifth, sometimes in the month there's a fifth, we do the posture correction, the stick Parking the stick. Let's bring down the inside lights too. And then we start over again the first Thursday of the next month with a posture.
And that's the first one, and then the second one. So you do it in a cycle.
Yeah, we keep cycling through them again and again. But more of us have been here for more than we go to a deeper level of fame. I'll tell you this afterwards. You can see it.
Okay.
The posture is generally about finding your center, the form of what I would term physical samadhi. And you're dealing mainly with distress versus comfort. And silence should be the comfortable way. Second, there's the natural breath. First one we call the natural posture. Second is natural breath following the body, following the breath. Body knows this breath. So we speak there of emotional samadhi, anxiety versus serenity. They're on the same spectrum. Distress and comfort on the same spectrum for the first one. Anxiety and serenity.
When you cross your legs, do you always cross them in the same way, or do you alternate?
I alternate left and right with each period. And mindful attention, the third, nurturing beginner's mind. In other words, every time we come in, we try to start fresh. Leave the baggage behind, leave the baggage at the door as much as possible. You could call it mental samadhi, development through attention. More confusion, less confusion, more clarity. And on the fourth, walking and chanting, about stillness and motion, feeling the stillness and the emotion in the stillness. We can think of it as social samadhi, friction versus harmony in relationships, so forth. There's a method to our madness here. So for this period, I want you to obviously sit facing the wall, attention, posture, breath, as you begin to posture. And in your own mind, Josh, you can move through the content of form, sensation, emotion, formation, motive, intent, kind of consciousness moment.
Another.
Senator, please, let's bring up the pulse lights, just the inlet lights. So Nate, take a look at that.
Thank you.
It's posted in the hallway out there. In case you ever want a refresher of the design of the place. So this is Q&A. Anybody have anything we could discuss and add tonight? That's what Kuroshi would say. You can talk all day and never make them understand. We recognize the limit to the record with series approach.
Noticing some synesthesia. I was noticing that the quality of vision seemed to be connected to physical, how it felt also. It was just blending together.
Tell us more about what you mean by quality of vision.
Well, in this case, it would the pores on the wall looked like skin this particular time. It was nothing in particular, just that it was related to how the physical sensation.
Did it start breathing?
Um,
Dogen said, he said, do not be surprised by a real dragon. And I think the appearance of a real dragon maybe would be a little clearer. There was a story of a man who collected dragon art, paintings and sculptures, and fascinated with dragons. One day, a dragon found out about this, decided to pay him a visit, came in the window, carried him to death. Literally. It's supposed to be a true story. I told you one of the dragon painter hired by abbot of a monastery to paint of a dragon on the wall. It's a true story. There's a picture in Kyosaku of the actual painting. And the abbot interviewed him, said, well, tell me, do you paint from imagination or from real life? So, well, I have to confess I paint from imagination. I've never seen a real dragon. He said, well, come by my place here, any number of them. So he arranges to go visit the monastery. He has to go look at the monastery anyway to the wall he's going to paint. And he shows up, and the abbot comes down to greet him. And he said, I've come to see that dragon you told me about. And he said, the hall is full of them. Don't you see them? And he said, I have to confess, I don't see any dragons. Well, sit here till you do. So the story goes, he sits there. One day he comes, I don't know how long sometimes they take short time, sometimes long. He comes running into the abbot's room and says, I've seen the dragon, I've seen the dragon, I know what you mean. He said, did you hear a roar? No, I didn't hear a roar. He goes back and sits until he hears the dragon roar. Then he allows him to paint the dragon. So we see the dragon, we feel the dragon, we hear the dragon, we are the dragon. Bruce Lee.
what does that mean? What does that mean? We are the dragon.
Kundalini, the life force, it's one level is like reptilian. The dragon is a symbol of thirst, and also energy, snapping with electricity, it just fires to that. And the dragon is seeking water. Because Mokri Golden's fish drum was really a masterful piece of work. See the dragons, they're biting this ball. Dragons often represented with the ball under the chin, hidden under the chin, under the lower mouth. The ball represents water or satisfaction of their thirst. They're seeking water to quench their thirst. So the dragon represents that aspect of you. You're seeking to quench your thirst. And for the dragon to come alive in your practice stage, you're starting to wake up to the dynamic reality of what your consciousness is or what it is like. So Buddha said the mind, discriminating mind, imposes a false stillness on reality. So the process of awakening or insight, kensho, means everything comes to life. Everything comes alive. Also, Okoroshi said the stone in the garden is alive. So if there's no separation of self and other, then there's no separation of living and non-living. That is, for you, everything in your consciousness is alive with your life. Dogen and I can't remember which one is the other one. Said myriad objects partake of the Buddha body. All things realize correct awakening. At this time, all things realize correct awakening. Things. Myriad objects partake of the Buddha body. There's kind of a false separation of us and it. And when that separation goes away and we come back into non-dual reality, everything is alive. It's alive with our consciousness, with our life, our consciousness. We are the consciousness of the universe. Not heavier than it used to be. We'll worry about this from of course. Long to get on. The Buddha had its own seat on Japan Airlines.
First class.
Probably not.
Window seat or aisle seat? Window seat or aisle seat?
You're like the guy who gets shot with the arrow and he wants to know how many arrows do they going to have? Kind of bold. Pull the arrow out, stupid.